living with his wife, and pet bunny, Onion. So as you can see, Jay is up to a lot and has a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. So I'm going to hand it on over now.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I am going to get started with my presentation about addressing the needs of gender diverse youth. So, Yasmin spoke a little bit about me already, but my name is Jay. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the youth training coordinator here at Families Together New York State. And I'm a person with lived experience as well as a transgender man. So I've known that I was a gender diverse individual since I was about 11 years old. So my story does start very young. I am also a person with that lived experience in the mental health system, and I've been a youth peer advocate in the community setting, the residential setting, and the clinic setting prior. Okay. So just a little icebreaker in the chat. You might have already started putting your name. If you could put your pronouns, I know not everybody thinks of it immediately, but if you could put your pronouns, the agency you work at, and if you could put the region there as well, just like a general area of where in New York you're coming from. And just tell us about a favorite article of clothing that you have in your closet right now. You could put it in the chat, you could unmute, whatever you want.
Hi everyone. I'm so sorry that my camera is off. I'm actually on my lunch break, but I did want to have the honor of attending one of your TA calls. Because I haven't done so yet and I'm fairly new. So Joanna and I thought that it would be a good idea for me to attend. She said it would be great. So I'm like, hey, I look forward to it. I will attend. So please excuse that my camera's off. I will turn it on within the next 10 minutes. My name is Unique, pronouns she, her. I work for Families Together in New York State. And a favorite article of clothing that I have in my closet right now would be my sweaters. It's like sweater weather now, and I've just been going in there popping a different one out every day since the wind came in the morning. So, yeah, thank you for having me, guys.
I put mine in the chat, but I'll introduce myself out loud. Megan Simpson. I work for Families Together in New York State. And my favorite clothing item is an authentic cherry blossom silk kimono that I got. I actually ordered it from Japan, really silly expensive. And I typically only wear it as a bathrobe because I don't know, I don't feel like wearing the kimono out in public, but it's like my prized clothing item.
Thank y'all for sharing. So y'all already got my most of my introduction, but my favorite article of clothing. It's not in my closet, it's actually on me right now. I have a t-shirt that says T for T, which actually stands for trans to trans or trans for trans. And it's because my wife and I are both trans and we're married. So we got this little cute t-shirt to sort of show our pride. So for the occasion, I wore it today.
Oh, thank you for sharing, Jay.
Thank you. So I think everybody's probably got their stuff in the chat at least. So I will keep going here. Just a few housekeeping things here.
Yes. So during the duration of this training, please keep your mics muted unless you're getting ready to speak, just to eliminate any background noise, but there will be space for conversation. If you don't feel comfortable to come off of mute, you can put your questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and we will address them before the call is over. And we also want to acknowledge that everyone is coming from a different place of knowledge in this chat, and it's a place of communal learning. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start going over what we're going to talk about today. So this is the agenda that we have for us today. We're going to talk about the types of transitions and the ways that youth peer advocates can support each of those types of transitions. And there'll be a little bit of room for discussion as well if you have any questions or stories of your own. We're going to be building an ally toolkit, or what I'm calling an LGBTQ toolkit as well, because there are people that are within the LGBTQ community, but they don't necessarily fall into that T or gender diverse realm. So they're still allies in one way, but maybe not, in some other ways. Specifically, we're going to talk about misgendering because I think that that's a pain point that kind of inspired me to put this together. That a lot of people do express some fear or apprehension around misgendering somebody or getting some information wrong. So I'm going to cover that a little bit more in depth. We're going to give some regional and online resources. I'm also going to put that in the chat in a little bit. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my story and offer opportunities if there are any questions about my story, specifically things that you could learn from in your own experience. Okay. All right. So here are some of the basic definitions that are going to be helpful for this training and beyond the training. I'm going to be sending in the chat in a little bit a more comprehensive list of terms that are good to know as well. It's a very long list and it's taken from the Safe Zone project. It can be overwhelming to see all of these terms, but know that you don't have to memorize all of them. The best way to really learn these terms is to learn with them as they come up in conversation between you and other youths that you interact with, or even just people in general in your life that you're interacting with on a regular basis. So the first term that I have here is gender diverse. It's a kind of a loose, vague term, but for the purposes of this TA call, it's going to mean youth that are not within the category of what we call cisgender, and they don't fully identify with their sex assigned at birth. So then we're going to get to biological sex. It's the chromosomal, hormonal, and anatomical characteristics that are used to classify an individual as female, male, or intersex. So that's what we're physically either seeing on somebody or even, what they physically have and do not see. Their hormones, I'm sure you've heard testosterone, estrogen. That's something that everybody has, those two hormones, as well as chromosomes. We know chromosomes XY, XX, these different combinations. There are other combinations, and that's actually what leads to that intersex designation. That, if it's desired to get into in another call, we can. Gender identity is the internal perception of one's gender. So that's how they label themselves based on how much they align or do not align with a certain identity. This is often conflated with biological sex or sex assigned at birth. So this is identity. This is how people feel about themselves, how they want others to perceive them, rather than what I was talking about earlier, that biological or those physical characteristics. So transgender is an umbrella term for anyone whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity do not correspond in any way, in the expected way. So this can often include terms that you might have heard of before, such as non-binary, genderqueer, gender nonconforming, and a whole bunch of other ones that are on that list that I'm going to share a little later. Cisgender is a gender description for somebody whose sex assigned at birth and gender identity correspond in the expected way, in the way that, society anticipates them to do. The word cisgender can also be shortened to cis. So that's CIS, just those first three letters of the word. And just a quick language note, not every youth are going to use the same terminology to describe themselves. While it's great to know the terminology, it's actually best to practice following the youth's lead. So you might perceive, maybe they fall under this umbrella or they fall under this term, and they might identify with a different term that doesn't match what you see or what you think. And if a youth is using the term biological sex rather than, let's say, assigned sex at birth or assigned gender at birth, which is a term I prefer to use, you're going with what they use. We're meeting youth where they're at. Even trans youth or gender diverse youth don't always know all of these terms that I'm bringing up as well. Okay. Oh, no. All right. So this is the CAST model of identity development. It seems a little technical, jargony, but I'm gonna try to break it down to be a little less so. So it's how everybody kind of comes together with their identity, but it does apply very strongly to the LGBTQ community. So the confusion stage is where the youth needs a true space of non-judgment. I think that we do that with youth peer advocates. As youth peer advocates with youth all the time. But this is specifically focusing on their gender identity, and they need that non-judgmental space to really explore that, see what's out there, what terms they want to use for themselves, what they want to see for their life path moving forward. So what you could do to support them in this stage is a lot of validation. That's it, just validation, just seeing them for who they are, hearing what they have to say, and just makes sense. Okay, cool. Whatever you want to do, right? It's that simple. Comparison stage. So the youth are figuring out what parts of their current life and previous life they want to keep, right? And also what they want to see for the future. So youth are looking at maybe other trans youth and saying, wow, they look so much cooler than me, or wow, they pass better. They have more things that I don't have as far as my transition goes, as far as maybe clothing, haircuts, and they're figuring out what they want. So usually that transition, oh, I'm sorry. Aha. Okay, I lost myself in my notes there. My apologies. So you can support them by reassuring them the youth's connection with the old life is okay. I say that in quotes, like old life, and connect them to community resources for the future. So there might be maybe if you have a trans masculine youth, they see some feminine things and they're like, oh, but I still like this. Does that make me less of a man? No. Right. So we're kind of validating and comforting and reassuring as they need, following their lead, that they can be who they are no matter what. So tolerance stage, there might be some shame, fear, frustration, because that's the step before acceptance. Yeah, well, okay, I'm trans, but there's all these negative things associated with trans. I don't know if I really, really want to do this. Do I really want to come out? Do I really want to live this life? So they might need somebody safe to explore their identity with. You might be the only person that they want to be open about and talk to about these things. You might hear a common theme is that it's just really about acceptance and validation. It's like the biggest part. If you take nothing away, nothing else away from this, that's the biggest part. The acceptance stage. So the youth are learning to accept themselves and are wishing for others to accept them and their identity. So you might need to provide affirmations. You might need to come up with a plan for a more widespread coming out. And they're like, I don't know how I want to do this. That's where you come in and just help support, facilitate, a conversation about it, taking their lead. A lot of that is things that we already do as youth peer advocates. The pride stage. So this is where the youth begins to care a lot less about what others think, and they're coming in with confidence. So you might need to continuously support them through the process, and just encourage them to create a support network to fall back on. What kind of community resources are there? Or do they have friends that are also LGBTQ? Are they online? Are they in person? Are they at school? Finding different ways to connect socially with youth that are at least around their age. And finally, synthesis. So youth may not see, youth may see not being vocal about their identities as acceptable now. Okay, I'm not going to come out and say I'm trans, I'm trans, I'm trans, I'm trans everywhere. I'm just settling down, living my life. If somebody asks me if I'm trans, I'll say yes, being a little bit more casual about it. So you're just continuing to build that ongoing trust, and just engaging with the identity. You're just continuing to say, hey, it's cool. It's cool. Let's go to this place. Let's do what you want. And honestly, you might even be you might even be supporting them and coming away from leaning too much on those supports. For example, I've been going to the LGBT center nearby every day because I don't feel safe anywhere else. But I really want to find safety somewhere else. I really want to be able to be myself and do it in a way in a place that's not LGBTQ specific. I just want to be integrated into everything. Okay. So now we're gonna, maybe find a different resource that is that is just, oh, I'm sorry, a different resource that is just for youth, any youth, cisgender youth, trans youth, whoever. That was a little bit bulky. Um, does anybody have any questions about any of that? Because that was a lot, I think.
No, not at the moment. I'm taking it all in because I did want to know a lot more about this subject. So I'm happy that I'm here.
Yeah, that gives a really good overview of those different stages, and I wasn't familiar with that, so thanks, Jay.
Thank you for your feedback.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So then I'm going to now turn it over to the different types of transitions. This is the internal discovery phase. So that's when the youth is starting to talk about things that are going on. Actually, they might not even be ready to talk about it. They might just be sending you little signals. They might just be like, this is something I saw online. What do you think? Like sending you an article, if you have them on text message, texting an article to you about, trying to think of the person in my head, Laverne Cox, right? Laverne Cox was in Orange is the New Black. She was an actress in Orange is the New Black. What do you think about that? Right. And then you talk about it at your next meeting. There was this show, Orange is the New Black, a little while ago, this actress, like, what do you think about this? Right. Like, so they're kind of like feeling things out, and figuring out what they want for themselves, as we were talking about with the cast model. So I had just included a few things. It's kind of an overview of what we were just talking about. Having non-judgmental conversations, supporting and affirming youth choice, and providing resources. Um, Social transition. So once the youth is comfortable enough to socially transition, the youth might do what's called coming out, and telling people about their gender diverse identity. So they might change the way they dress. They might change their hair. They might change their name. It doesn't necessarily have to include the legal transition or the medical transition, which are the next types. So you might be supporting them by trying on new names, gendered language. Let's say somebody, you're introduced to a youth named Jessica. Jessica wants to try Jake. Okay, so now you're calling them Jake. You are the person that you're going to call them Jake when y'all are together, and they might say, I don't want anybody else to call me Jake yet. I just want to see what it feels like to be called Jake. Okay, so just Jake with me. You might be supporting them with gender affirming haircuts as they start to come out a little bit more. You're supporting them with, if you know how to do makeup and they want to learn how to do makeup, doing makeup. That's the best one that I can come up with. That's the best example. And it is very important to note. I'm going to say this for all the slides right now, with the transitions. It might stop at that slide. They don't have to progress through every type of transition. A youth might socially transition and say, I'm done. I don't want to do the medical interventions. I don't want to change my name. I just want to live my life how I want to on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to do anything about it. And that's perfectly acceptable. But if they do decide, I want to legally transition, just fixing that. So they might update their vital docs. And this is something that I have extensive knowledge about because I have walked several people through the process, and I've gone through my own process, and two people I've accompanied them through every single step. There are guides that are online that are on that resource document that I'm going to put in the chat later. And that will help you kind of map out that process. Youth can't change their name legally until they are 18 or unless a parent does it for them, parental consent. But we work with youth up to 21. So if the youth is 18, they're 18, they're doing it, right? But if they're not 18 yet, you might just want to start with those discussions about either parental consent, or discussions about what they're going to prepare, what kind of documents, what kind of information are they going to prepare for when they turn 18. Looking into financial aid resources. One of the ones that I can think of off the top of my head is called Trans Lifeline. It's a hotline, but they have a micro grants program, and they will finance people's legal documentation changes, so that they don't have to pay for it themselves. There's also waivers. A lot of times the initial court fee can be waived due to income. And so if you're working with youth who are in a Medicaid-based program like CIFTIS, like child treatment support services, child and family treatment support services, then you can they'll probably qualify for one of those waivers. They'd have to pay for other documentation, but cross that bridge when you get there. So you might want to come up with an updated documentation checklist or find one online. I think you could find them in a lot of different trans resources like the Trans Equality Center, things like that. Just so that they can change every single document, because sometimes you forget. There's so many things that you have to change. I was getting mail in my what's called dead name, previous name, birth name, for like 5 years, just like little junk mail and things like that. So there's a lot of things you have to change. And then medical records. I want to emphasize with medical records, really takes time to explain that their name and pronouns, their chosen name and chosen pronouns that they have come to you with should be in almost every piece of medical documentation. Not all. Because obviously insurance has their way of keeping track of things legally. And different clinics will have different rules. The chart's probably going to have their legal name, even if it doesn't correspond with their, excuse me, chosen name. There's going to be the narrative of the note. It shouldn't contain anything but the chosen name and pronouns. And like I said, that might vary from place to place, maybe. But generally, you should have the chosen name and pronouns in the entire narrative of the note, with maybe a note at the top that says, hey, this person has this legal name, but we're going to refer to them as this going forward. I had, speaking from my lived experience, even after legally transitioning my name and pronouns, was referred to with the wrong pronouns 5 years after changing my name in a hospital setting, and saw it in my medical records. That was very distressing to me. And now I'm talking about youth that don't have the ability to even change it legally. So we definitely want to advocate pretty strongly with youth being able to, stick up for themselves, or, educating the family on their chosen name and pronouns being in the narrative of the note. I spent quite a bit of time on that one. So medical transition. Just change my thing right here. Why isn't there we go. So youth might begin puberty blockers, hormone blockers. There's a lot of controversy about what hormone blockers do, how it affects youth, depending on their age. It's always about a conversation with the doctor, right? It's always about educating the family and the youth about side effects, but it is typically a safe thing. Hormones with parental consent, right? And it might be discussing with the parents, we're not discussing with the parents, but the youth are discussing with the parents, and us preparing them for that discussion of, I would like you to consent to this. This is very important to me, and this is why it's very important to me. Typically, surgical intervention is not available until they're 18 or older. That is a myth that has perpetuated the media. There's no reason to provide surgical intervention, most surgical intervention, 18 and younger. So another thing you might want to do is create a pros and cons list with the youth, about really just talking about those side effects. Is this, this is what you want to do, so then what are the pros and cons? Not saying, don't go through with it. Just now that you've decided, yes, I want to go through with it. Yes, I want to have these hormones. Yes, when I turn 18, I want the surgical procedure. Okay, so we're going through with it. And what do we have to be prepared for? Right? There's a procedure called, facial feminization surgery, right? Um, is the youth prepared for the healing time, right? Is the youth prepared for what their face will look like as the swelling goes down and things like that? That's just an example, but are we prepared for these things? Do we know everything? What are the pros and cons as we go through? Even if it's a net positive, we're doing it. What are the pros and cons? Creating a list of questions for the doctor as we're going in and talking about hormones. Maybe your role as a YPA could be, what are we going to talk to the doctor about as we go in, and try to get you hormones or try to prepare for a surgical intervention after you turn 18. And finding non-surgical gender affirming items. So I'm going to put I have in the next slide a few items that we can use to provide that gender affirming care sort of without the surgical intervention. You might have heard of some of these already. A binder is an item that a youth would put over their chest, and that would flatten their chest and give them this appearance that they have a flat chest. It should not be worn for over 8 hours. Youth should be taking it off and taking a break throughout the day and should be staying hydrated throughout the day, feeding themselves throughout the day regularly in order to prevent damage, really. But it is a safe thing to use as long as you stick with those guidelines. A gaff or tucking underwear is going to conceal any genitalia in the bottom. So youth will wear that to, again, have like a flat appearance at the bottom. And an STP or a packer is going to give the appearance that they have something at the bottom, genitalia at the bottom. An STP has been called a shiwi before. People have called it that. It's not. It's called an STP. Stand 2P is what it stands for. And it allows a youth that might not be able to use like a urinal or stand a pee to be able to stand to urinate. So those are the things that you can provide a youth before they have the ability to surgically transition. And then hormone blockers, we had spoken about a little bit earlier. It stops the process of puberty or natural progression of their hormones. So if they were assigned male at birth, testosterone, it's blocking the process of testosterone changing their body. And then the opposite is true for people assigned female at birth, typically. So these are some of the hormone replacement interventions. And this is, just for educational purposes, so that if you come across a youth that wants to go through with some of these gender affirming procedures, you just know the information while you're supporting them through it in the capacity as a YPA. So estrogen is the feminizing hormone. So that's going to give the appearance of like the softer skin. That's going to soften the vocal cords so that youth that are assigned male at birth can train their vocal cords and have a higher voice, which they can do without the estrogen, but it makes it a lot easier. And then an anti-androgen is going to take away the effects of testosterone for a youth assigned male at birth or who has a high level of testosterone, so that estrogen can do its job. Estrogen cannot provide a full gender affirming transition by itself. So an anti-androgen is used to supplement that. Progesterone is an additional feminizing hormone that seeks to change the chest area so that youth do not have to have a breast augmentation when they're older. And it's usually only used after estrogen and anti-androgens work well, and they respond well to it physiologically. And then testosterone is the masculinizing hormone. It is the only one that is needed because it does it creates those changes on its own. Nothing is needed to block natural estrogen. and like I said, what I'm saying is not a replacement for what a doctor is saying. If you're supporting a trans youth with a medical transition, definitely ask the doctor for any, clarification on any of this. So just a note on safety. The thing I want to really turn attention to is that youth have been known to, if they don't have access to these items, tuck with duct tape. So that's trying to flatten the bottom, flatten their genitalia, uh, with duct tape, or other types of unsafe tape. Binding with ace bandages or duct tape flattening their chest with those items, which can do permanent damage, and then ordering unregulated substances from the internet. And that's why we have gender affirming care. I think that the misunderstanding is that these items are what we're giving to the youth and we're creating like this permanent damage to the youth, but these are actually the things that we're using to avoid permanent damage to the youth's body. And to be able to even honestly, these gender affirming items, when a youth is young and they're still exploring and they may make a different choice as they get older, this is the item that gives them the freedom to not make a permanent life altering choice at a young age and allowing them to explore their identity and what they want for themselves in the future. So this actually promotes safety. We're starting on the ally toolkit. So misgendering, is the intention, unintentional or intentional misuse of somebody's gendered language, their name, the pronouns that they use. So for me, if I use he, him pronouns, you're using she, her pronouns for me, that's misgendering. My name is Jay. Let's say my birth name was Jackie. It's not, but let's say it was, right? If you're calling me Jackie instead of Jay, then that's what's called dead naming. And I see a hand raised. So go ahead, Gavin.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to ask, in a scenario where a child is using an unsafe method that they came up with on their own, what would you do to convince them to stop? If
I'm sorry. Could you
like,
repeat the question? I was looking at something in the chat. Go ahead.
in a scenario where a child is using an unsafe and dangerous method, what would you do to help them stop to prevent them from damaging themselves?
I think that's a good question. I think that sort of approach it in the way that you would with, let's say, self-harm. But that would be my recommendation. A youth that's self-harming, it is in a way a form of unintentional self-harm, I would say. And however your specific agency would address that. Usually it's not, it's about conversations, it's about harm reduction, it's about, how do we want to talk to, if it's a residential, how do we want to talk about, talk to the team about it? If it's community, how do we want to talk to parents, guardians, caregivers about it, to try to support them in using those safer items, right? Like, I mean, with a lot of other things, we can't like stop everything. We can't stop the youth with everything. But we're promoting their safety and we're giving them the resources um, to maintain their own safety. And if it becomes a situation that is life threatening, of course, we have to, stick with our uh, mandated, like what we have to do policy wise with our programs. But otherwise, really just, educating and informing and allowing them to make the choice. And then I saw in the chat as well, clarifying what just addressed in regards to documentation. As a peer advocate, how could someone write their service notes and address youth with their chosen names? Yes, so I am going to put like a little in the chat. I'm going to put like an example, right? So So I think that answers your question. So I put, please note this youth uses the name, and then whatever the name is, and the pronouns she, her. You can fill it in with whatever, which will be used for the purposes of this note. So if you're getting pushback from just making a normal narrative without this note, and they say, like, we need some kind of proof that the narrative contains the legal name, the legal name is going to be at the top. So just ensure that you're designating in the narrative this isn't the youth's legal name, and it's not the pronouns that you're going to see, the gender designation that you're going to see on the insurance. That's what you don't have to use you don't have to say their legal name is this, but, well, you know what? Honestly, I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't have to, but we really are going by policy of what, documentation is kind of a tricky thing. We're going with the policy of whatever that agency is. But I think New York is generally the type of place that is legislatively protective and is like, as long as it fits that minimum standard with insurance companies, just making sure that the person who's reading the note from the insurance company is aware that this is the person that we're talking about in the narrative of the note. Would it be appropriate? That's a good point. Yes. Definitely ask your youth before if you're advocating these, include the youth if you can in advocating for these choices, for these changes. But if you're advocating for the youth, yes, make sure that they're okay with the chosen name being in the documentation, because in some cases their parents can see this documentation as well. So thank you for those questions. If there's anything that I've missed, I'll try to get back to it in the end of this call. So I have a few graphics. Well, I thought I had a few graphics. Yes, I have a few graphics in addressing new pronouns, getting new pronouns right. So I'm just going to go through them very quickly. When you slip up, correct yourself briefly and move on, right? Just, oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Or, oh, thanks for catching it. Here we go. When someone corrects you, say thank you. I actually changed what I said to thank you because as a trans person, I'd rather somebody say thank you and, be like, oh, yeah, oops. This is an opportunity to change it rather than sorry feels like a punishment. It's like, it's okay. Like, I don't want the pressure to say it's okay. It's like, like, so I would say that thank you is the preferred option. And just moving on from there, getting in the habit of interrupting people with a quick correction. So if the youth is okay with it, with you correcting somebody else, do it, right? If we're trying to be the safe people for the youth and that one person that's advocating for the youth, then you're the one that's, I mean, you might get pushback, but you're the one that's kind of being like, oh, you said he, she. Actually, this person goes by she now. And you might not get a good reaction all the time. People might keep messing up, and you just keep being there. For every time you get it wrong, do it 3 times right. You might want to do it in your head. You might want to practice with people that are privy to this youth. Because of course we got to be careful with HIPAA. We can't be practicing these names with people that are not privy to the youth, that they're not allowed by HIPAA to, know their names. But you might want to practice with supervisor, program director, other people on the team, care manager, family peer advocate, anybody that's allowed to know this information. Consider meeting with someone to practice. Goes along with the last thing. Team meetings that maybe don't include the youth or do include the youth or whatever, just keep practicing. Don't make anyone feel like a burden for having pronouns that you're struggling with. Youth, know that it's hard. I know it's hard. A lot of trans people know that it's hard with, it's all right. No pressure. There shouldn't be fear or pressure. It is stressful to be misgendered, but it's a lot more stressful to be told over and over again, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it, I'm sorry, I think, appreciate the effort, but it can be stressful. You don't want to give the undue stress. And then don't make them alleviate your guilt. Just like with any conflict resolution, right? And this, you might not see this as a conflict. This is a very small conflict, but it really is a conflict. Just like with any conflict as resolution, like, is it appropriate to apologize to the point that you are like almost forcing an okay or an it's okay or an I forgive you, right? Like, just like any other conflict, let the person feel their feelings and be mad about it and be in that. Um, and they'll come to it. It's not the end of the world. So I have the source, the Instagram user Ty Draws, if you wanted to see more information that person has on their social media. This is a direct quote from a trans youth that I worked with. And I just wanted to provide this quote to give a little bit of context to the frustration, and being able to hear, like to be able to hear those difficult things and hear their voice out in a time where you actually might be the one in the wrong. So the youth said, okay, something that happens a lot is that they misgender me when I'm not in the room or when talking to my mom. Like, if you're going to misgender me, at least do it to my face. So the context is that this specific youth was very frustrated that members of the team would use the correct name and pronouns with him and then would go to mom or school staff and would not use them. And that inconsistency was very frustrating for him because then he felt like every time somebody was speaking to him, they were not being genuine. It carried over to everything else. All right. This is the more discussion based. I've spoken quite a bit. I've thrown out a lot of information. So focusing on common experience, I'd like to invite y'all to just let me know what you think that means for you. What could you do to focus on common experience if you work with a youth who is gender diverse? Or if you don't, just imagine what it would be like and, think about how could you focus on the common experience? And you can unmute, put in the chat, whatever.
I would say one thing that pops into my mind is kind of like just relating, being able to relate with them on, let's say, a common experience. It might not be similar and exactly the same, but just being able to relate with the youth.
Yeah, thank you. I have some um examples, sorry, of exactly what you're talking about. I had put, do you have some experience with other people in the trans community? You might have a friend who is trans, you might have a sibling who's trans, a coworker who's trans. So just drawing on that experience. Do you have other experiences that you could build off of? If a youth is feeling pain because they've been discriminated against, have you been discriminated against? Especially by something you couldn't control, and it's not the same experience. But like I was explaining, like with the LGBTQ part of the spectrum, if you are bisexual, you might relate to a moment that somebody misunderstood your bisexuality. And now you can kind of refer back to that, understand like the feelings of it, even if the experience is different. And honestly, do you have common interests outside of the trans person's the person's transgender identity? Sorry. That's like I'm gonna emphasize that for sure. Um, do you both live in the same area? Do you both like the same TV shows? On a deeper level, do you have the same values, beliefs, whatever, like conversations that you can take from that don't always constantly involve their trans identity. Um, Things that you can draw on when maybe you honestly you need to buy time because you aren't educated enough in something. You want to look something up. You want to get a little bit more information from other members of the team. Let's talk about something that doesn't necessarily involve your trans identity. Let's take it off of your trans identity because you've been talking about this for a while, right? You've been going into these details with the doctors, with your parents, with your teachers. You've been doing it and doing it. Where's the reprieve from that, right? What do I have in common with you? Even build on your experience as a youth peer advocate being in the same systems, right? Like go back to that. It doesn't always have to be about the trans identity. So thank you so much for bringing that up because that brought up my examples that I had. Um,
Thank you.
so the next one, what is happening with my mouse? Oh, okay. Um, educating yourself ahead of time. So does anybody have any ideas about how you could do that? This one I think is a little more straightforward.
I guess just like doing your research or connecting with those who have the knowledge on this topic, or maybe just connecting with your friends, maybe some friends who are trans, some friends who are living through lived experience.
Sorry, I was having a bit of an issue there. Yes, thank you. That was one of the ones that I did have, was drawing on other experiences with other members of the community that you might know, allies, that are in your network, people that just might have more expertise. And outside of, people, Google is cool. Love Google. Google has a wealth of information. Now, of course, Google is going to require you, as opposed to maybe a book that you get from the library or something like that, or, Britannica encyclopedia, something like that, an official source. Google is going to require you to do a little bit more footwork in parsing out what's more like peer reviewed, what is maybe coming from a trans led or gender diverse led source or an LGBTQ source. But it is a good resource in general. And honestly, you might want to maybe take your sources from Google that you found and say to your youth, like, have you heard of this? What do you think about it? And maybe it's a trusted source. Maybe you found, I think most people know Trevor Project, but let's say you know nothing about Trevor Project and you look it up and you see Trevor Project, right? Trevor Project is an LGBTQ hotline across the country for ages 13 to 24. You might come across that and you're Googling, you have no idea what it is. You go to your youth, you're like, I found this thing online called Trevor Project. What do you think? And they're like, I have an account on Trevor Space, which is like their youth social media, right? Like, oh, okay, so you know this already. You know this resource, and now you can take it back and do your own research through Trevor Project. Read through some of those articles there, the resources there, find them on social media, read their social media because now you know it's a trusted source. Um, does anybody else have any ideas for this? Just again, put it in the chat, unmute, whatever, or we could go forward. Maybe like a thumbs up if we can go forward. I don't want to go too fast. Okay, thank you. All right. I feel like I'm skipping a slide. That learn from the youth, and be curious. Um, I will say take this with a grain of salt. You don't want to be asking the youth about everything, like every single experience that they have, and make them that point of education, that all knowing, all being point of education, but just learning from what they have to say. And Yasmin actually put the handouts that I was talking about earlier in the chat. Thank you, Yasmin. So does anybody have any ideas? This might be a tricky one, I understand. Does anybody have any ideas about how they can have that openness, that curiosity, how they can show that with youth?
They can maybe just like show that they're interested and like wanting to know more, and wanting to learn more about them, about their gender and everything, how what they identify as, and just like showing that interest.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have actually in the chat there is one more. You'll see it's called Gender Diversity Respectful Curiosity Guidance, is one of the handouts that was put in the chat. And that actually follows what you were saying. So that is a grid that includes things that are often said that are like these missteps, that includes maybe some outdated language, and what you can say different. This is one of the favorite handouts that I made because I think that there's terms that have been used for quite a while, and people don't even realize because like that the trans community is using different language. Like biological sex is a great example, even though I used it at the beginning as a term to know, and it is a term to know. A lot of trans people are saying sex assigned at birth or gender assigned at birth, and biological sex is being like phased out because it kind of like gives this feeling of almost like because of your biology you are this, because of your biology you are this. So people have been changing the language, and if you're not in the trans community, you're not following all these like trans people on social media or all these trans influencers and things like that, you might not know this. So that's just a little guide to being able to feel comfortable with being curious. Rather than almost feeling this shame of like, I don't want to offend the youth. I don't want to say the wrong thing, or being like overly confident and being like, tell me your whole life story. And then the youth is feeling uncomfortable with that because now they're put in a position of, kind of having to be this end all be all educator. And if they say the wrong thing, they're offending everybody in the trans community ever all the time, right? So I put together that little guide, and I did use some help from a lot of my friends out here, to kind of be like, what do you guys think of this, right? So this is like peer reviewed, peer reviewed information. And also, thank you, Kristen, for putting that in there. I think that resource is in that giant list. And I really was so happy to find that because as somebody from Long Island, I don't conceptualize upstate the way that somebody would in all of those parts of upstate, downstate, southern tier, all that. So I did a lot of research into that, and I was so relieved to find that the Q Center existed, in those areas that seem so rural to me on the map. So thank you for pointing that out. And I hope that benefits, people that are either watching this call on this call right now. Last talking point that I was going to put out there was the power of okay. I think this is, maybe something I'm going to speak on a little bit first before kind of opening that up. So, similar to what was going on with the gay marriage debate, right, in the early 2000s, which I unfortunately lived through. That was a rough one. People debating whether or not gay marriage was cool. So gender diversity has become this politicized issue. So trans youth and adults alike are exposed to online and within their social circles, these in-person, spreading of a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ideas, and some are affirming positive opinions, and some are negative and even discriminatory opinions. So one of the things that youth queer advocates can do is acknowledge that in the stage of exploration and expanded understanding of gender identity, there's going to be many things that you do not understand about the youth's identity and expression. So if a youth comes to you and expresses that what they want to do about their identity or expression, it makes absolutely no sense to you. Sometimes it's okay to just say, okay, that sounds good. Sounds fine. Or a simple, succinct validation. Kind of showing that you're not bothered by it or that you're impartial to it, it gives that sense of security. That even if you don't fully understand it and you're like, yeah, hyping you up, right? And you're just like, oh, okay. Like, I gotta look it up. I gotta research it. I gotta figure it out. So even those with the most amount of pride and openness about their gender identity, their gender diversity, they still have unique aspects about themselves outside of being gender diverse. So that's important to know. I'm giving an example from my own work. I had a youth in the residential facility tell me something that they wanted to, be somehow that they wanted to present and identify as that genuinely, I genuinely didn't understand it. And I'm not like the king of being trans, and I was humbled for a second, and I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And I had to utilize the power of okay. It's all right. Well, when you're hanging out with me, you do you, right? And that was like I watched the weight leave their like weight off their shoulders, and starting to open up about so many other things and talk about so many other things, with their gender identity, their stress about their family not accepting certain parts of their identity. And it actually ended up creating some great conversations with the team, not related to being trans specific, but like the feeling of non-acceptance in their family, which was an awesome thing for just them to bring up for their treatment and what they wanted in their treatment. I got to see that youth feel very empowered in that conversation. It literally just started with me saying, like, well, because they were expecting me to be like shocked and like, why would you do that? Why would you? But it really, at the end of the day, that, what that youth shared with me was like, it wasn't hurting them, and it was really none of my business. It was their business. It was what they wanted to do. Um, So here's a couple of statewide resources. Just wanted to kind of put that up on the slide, but that is in the document, which the resources list version 1. So that is in there. All of these are in there. There's Planned Parenthoods everywhere. And they're usually recognized as this like gold standard of trans affirming care in areas that don't have other resources. So if you're really in a very resource low area, Planned Parenthood for sure. And then there are just a couple of other websites, places that you can contact if you don't know where to start. Some remote and online resources. Sometimes these remote, like national resources are the best resources, especially in areas outside of New York City where there's not a whole lot. I'm even talking about Long Island. There's not as much on Long Island as one might think. And Westchester and Rockland County, all these areas that are still pretty heavily populated, even if they're not the city. Trans Lifeline, Thrive Lifeline, Trevor Project, those are phone numbers that I put there that can be called in a crisis, and are just other resources that you can provide to the youth when you're, because we've spoken about boundaries before. If you've taken all the trainings, boundaries are big, boundaries are hard, they're big, and these are resources that you can provide to the youth to be like, this is an extra support that you have. There's always 988, but these are some extra LGBTQ specific resources. Trans Lifeline is for trans by trans. So that if you are calling Trans Lifeline, the person on the other end of the line is also trans. And it's not even just, you have to be in crisis. The youth could have a really hard day and talk to them. I probably wouldn't call them every single day because, it's a hotline, but like they say this is more of like just an all-purpose chat line, really. And Thrive is text only. Some youth hate calling. Thrive Lifeline. Trevor Project has online chat. Trevor Project has phone calls and has text messages, and also has their own social media for the youth. Okay. All right. My story. I'm going to read a little bit about my story. And I'm going to open up to the floor after I give a little bit about my story. I'm going to open up to the floor. It could be questions about my story. And it can be questions just about the whole presentation in general, because I did provide a lot of information in this past hour. And I want to make sure that I'm getting to as many people as possible when it comes to these questions. And if you do have any concerns about, just, where do I start with this? You could always refer to the documents that I provided. Where did my thing go? Yeah, so it's a pretty short narrative. When I was 10, I knew that something was up. And when I was 11, I actually started researching online, like, what am I feeling? Like, why am I feeling like this? It was because when I was a child, I didn't care. Everybody treated me the same. But as I grew older, and now we're getting into middle school, and now everybody's dating and whatever, I'm like, I don't like being perceived as a girl. This doesn't work for me. So I started looking up the first term that I ever. Now this was 2000. 2006. So the first term that I ever happened upon was the letter F, the letter T, and the letter M. So female to male. It is not commonly used at all anymore. But in 2006, that was the way that people tended to describe it. So I used the term FTM. With friends, I came out. I did not use the name Jay. I used the name Tyler. That's just a funny little tidbit there. And I had told my friends, I want to grow up to be a boy and I want to get the surgery. I'm going to fly to Sweden. I'm going to get the surgery and I'm going to come home a boy. That's not how that works, but that was how I thought it worked. And again, this is 2006. There wasn't a lot of information readily available. So now a lot of the youth actually, I've noticed they like know. They're like, yeah, I'm going to get this procedure and I'm going to get that. I'm going to do that hormone when I get older. Like they know. Um, Due to some other circumstances, I had brought myself back into the closet after coming out to just a few friends and the person that I was dating at the time. Came back out at 20 years old to everybody. Chose the name Jay, and here I am. I'm changed my name legally in 2016 and completed my medical transition by 2017. So since then, I have just kind of looked like this and been navigating the world like this. I did find a lot of pushback even in 2016 and 2017 because I was seeing a doctor that was like, "Well, I'm an endocrinologist. I'll figure it out." Um, so have fought back against a lot of medical professionals verbally, about misgendering me and putting the wrong things in my medical records. That's something that I'm very privy to, which is why I shared so much about it. Um, and like I said, the name change process, I mean, I could put together a whole TA call about that. And yeah, that's a big part of what I do. So I'd like to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions about anything that I discussed.
I don't have any particular questions. I just wanted to share something and get your feedback on it. So my brother is a trans young adult growing up. He identified as male around like 13. And throughout the ages of 13 to 18, he kind of hopped around from different names that he wanted to go by. It was Vinny, it was Common, it was another celebrity name. And he kind of hopped around between different names before he settled on Toby. And then once he settled on Toby, that became secure. That's been the name he's gone by for a few years. So I guess my question is kind of exploring what name that fits or feels most comfortable. Is that like a common thing? Is that an individualistic thing? Can you give me more insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, naming yourself is such an interesting process. And I think everybody does it differently. I've known a lot of people to go by multiple names. I myself, when coming out the second time, like shifted. It was only a matter of a few weeks, but like shifted through a bunch of names and was like, and really just relied on friends to give me feedback. Like the friend that told me, Jeremy, you're not a Jeremy, right? Like, like people that were really like supportive to me that were helping me kind of go through name by name by name. Some people do it online and just feel it out online. People that are kind of constantly, picking those things out. And some people, I actually had offered with my family, some people have their parents rename them because their parents say, "But I named you that." Okay, so rename me. That's one. I wouldn't say, like I wouldn't say it's common or it's uncommon. It really is just it's an individual thing. People come to their journeys in their own ways. They're influenced by so many different things. Some people look to media for their concepts of masculinity. Some people look to their family members, their friends, people they look up to, and will kind of develop and explore their identity based on those things. I don't know if that addresses what you were saying appropriately.
That does. It gives more insight, and also like gives more of a well-rounded perspective to other individuals' experiences.
Thank you.
I have a question. So when it comes to the process of legally transitioning one's name, is there a lot of barriers in the way of it, or is it a more simpler process?
I would definitely say that these days, um, if by barriers you mean like people not approving things, no, not these days. Barriers as in steps.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So to give kind of a short breakdown, you bring them a petition. You bring the court a petition, you pay a fee to submit that petition. You when the petition is approved, which I've literally never seen like modern day anybody not approve it, you get a court order. Now, there used to be a requirement. I had to go through the requirement that you had to publish your name change in a newspaper and you had to pay for that. The law has changed so that now trans people can actually strike that requirement for their own safety. So they have to like put in their petition it's a safety issue to, disclose that because there could be discrimination. They take the court order, which will have like a raised seal on it. And they have to provide that court order to the three major vital document providers, which is the birth certificate, the DMV, like ID. It doesn't have to be like driver's license, but just government ID, and Social Security. So once you send the court order to those different places, you can start to use those vital documents to change your name everywhere else. Like on your leases and on your utility bills and whatever. Things that probably at 18 you might not have so many things to think about, but as an adult, I definitely had a bunch of them to think about. There's one more thing I was going to say on that. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what it was. If it comes to me, it comes to me. But that's the short end of it. And you're going to have to pay fees to replace each of these documents. This is what I was going to say. Gender. Your gender can be changed on all of those documents. Yes, I had recently had somebody express surprise that you can change your gender on your birth certificate as well, even though but that was the gender you were assigned at birth. You can. You can change the birth certificate. You can change it to X now, actually. It really it makes very minimal difference in how you navigate the world if your birth certificate says male or female. The only thing you really have to do is when you go to the doctor, say I was, if you have a birth certificate or whatever, or you have insurance that designates one gender, you're presenting your own gender identity to medical professionals. And those are the only people that need to know, really. Like the people that are, providing medical care that affects your body. Other than that, who needs to be privy to the information that you used to have this or used to be this, you know? Um, so yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Thank you for your question. I was kind of hoping that somebody would ask about the name change process. Uh, I went through that so many times. Better be useful with something.
Yeah, I have a cousin and they transitioned I think about a decade ago and they changed their name to Chris and I remember the process of changing the name was a bit was like all over the place and a bit annoying for them. So I was just curious.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, is it possible that someone just might be like, hey, I want this name today, and then wake up a few months later and be like, hey, no, don't call me this. I now want this name. Does that happen
Yeah,
often?
absolutely. I mean, I don't want to use the term often necessarily because everybody's different. Like I had said with Megan, I wouldn't say often, but I would say that I think that a lot of what I've covered has really just come down to just try to be as open-minded as you can to things. Because I
Yeah.
think that people's initial reaction to, oh my God, you're changing your name like every 3 months or every month or every, whatever, is like this almost like this is so inconvenient. But just to remember, like, it is inconvenient, but it's not like, but this is what they're doing. And at the end of the day, how much does it really affect you if, you got to learn a new name every once in a while. And, like we learn a lot of, people update a lot of different things about themselves. Like people that aren't trans change their name. They go by nicknames. They like one nickname, they like the other nickname. I'll use the name Jennifer, for example, right? Like some people want to be called Jenny, some people want to be called Jen, some people want to be called Jennifer. And if somebody's changing up what nicknames they want, do we give them pushback?
No,
Typically no. Maybe
right,
somebody close to them might be a little stubborn, but I've called you Jenny all my life, you know what I mean? Like, but
right. But not a friend or initially. No, I get it. As long as they're happy, I'm happy. That's all
yeah.
that matters. So I
Yeah.
do have the family members who are trans, and tons of friends who are a part of the LGBTQ community, and I myself identify as well in the community. So I'm all for it. I support it all. As long as they're happy and it's not anything that's harming them or, I'm okay.
Thank you. It's
It's
beautiful.
their life, it's their book, it's their story that they're writing. So,
I thank you for saying that exactly, actually, because that puts so many things in perspective, and I love that. Thank you. It's true. You write your own story. You make
yeah,
a book of life.
a little side thing. It has nothing to do with the training, but I did read a book by, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, like the Four Agreements and the Fifth Agreements. By Miguel Ruiz. He's really big on that, on how, you write your own story, and you're just a character in someone else's story. So
I was gonna
they're
say if you put that in the
right in their yeah, they're actually right in their story, and you're right in your story because you're writing your own. So it took a while for me to like read all those books and actually come to terms with that. And once you figure that out, then you're like, oh, life is can be much easier.
I love that. Will you put that in the chat, like the name of the book? Like, because I
Of
want.
course. Of course. I'm really big on self-help books. I was really big on that a few years ago. So that's where I learned about Miguel Ruiz and all of his agreements. And it was like, I'm gonna definitely drop it in the chat. I'm not gonna take up too much of your time because I can go on and on and on when it comes to his agreements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Oh, I love that it's in like easy read everyday language too. I feel like that formal language can be a barrier to some, so that's awesome. I saw that in the chat. I have so much appreciated this very good discussion. And I really do encourage you. I don't think I put my, actually, oh, little blender. I don't think I put my email at the end of this presentation. So I am going to add that in the chat. Please, 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 please reach out to me if you have any questions about any of this material, or you know somebody maybe at your agency or something that is struggling with this material. I really encourage you to have them reach out to me. So it's jculkin@ftnys.org. And I know we're coming to the end a little bit, so I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you, and let you know about the next TA call that we are going to have. So the next one is going to be promoting healthy interpersonal relationships, and it's going to be presented by myself and Megan Simpson, who is in this call. She's from Youth Power. So that next call, I have it as just like this, 12:30 to 2, on October 17th this year. So we're gonna meet to discuss that. So definitely look out for that email to register for that. Another upcoming event, we have the QR code on the screen. This is also actually run by Megan Simpson, if I'm not correct. If I'm correct, yes? Just
Yeah.
want to verify. Okay, yes. So October 10th is the next one. So please scan the QR code if you're interested. Follow that link right there. And oh yes, Megan Simpson. It's at the bottom. I'm sorry. Didn't catch that. And then, oh, you know what? Actually, I'll go back to that for a second. And then just to get scanning QR codes and everything. And then the next event that we also have is the Youth Peer Advocate Supervisor Cafe. That's on the next slide. I'm going to move to that in a sec. So that's run by me. If you want to bring that to any supervisors at your agency, your supervisor specifically, if you are a youth peer advocate supervisor who happens to also be a youth peer advocate, awesome. Try to join that. The next one is, I'm going to go to the next slide actually to get that information again. Yes. Okay, there we go. So there's the link right there. It's a Zoom meeting. So the next one is November 8th. And that is that. That's the second Friday of every other month. So there's not going to be one in October. And it's from 12 to 1 on November 8th. Thank you for being here. I have very much enjoyed providing this technical assistance to y'all. This is like I said, it's something that is very close to my heart. And I really just want to be as helpful as possible to all y'all and the youth peer advocates out there with this subject. So please shoot me an email if you have any questions, know anybody who has any questions. So, and I give it back to the floor as well if y'all want to, ask any last minute questions before we wrap up.
Thank you, Jay. No, I just wanted to say I dropped the books in the chat.
I'm gonna look at that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
One of them is like a bundle, and the fifth agreements came separately, but the others are a bundle of 3.
Am I wrong that this was at Five Below at one point? I feel
Um,
like these books were at Five Below.
I got these off of from Barnes and Noble, so I have not. If they were there, I would have went there first.
Sometimes they cycle out.
Oh, they
Sometimes Five Below like cycles out like mainstream books and then they get rid of them. So I don't know, but thank you so much. What was it? Don Jose Ruiz. Don Miguel Ruiz. Okay.
They're just passing down their practices and their beliefs and
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
thank you, Jay.
So if we got nothing else, I mean, I'll stick around for a few minutes, but if we got nothing else, we're free to end early. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for having me, you guys.